Hello, all you wonderful VITA volunteers. You must have arrived at this video because you want to volunteer at a VITA site. That's wonderful. I will tell you, most people don't believe this, but we actually have fun doing taxes. My name is Jim Simpson, and on behalf of the City of Phoenix, Masters of Coin, and all the partners in the Central Arizona VITA network, we are preparing a series of videos that will help you get certified as a VITA volunteer. But you're probably watching this video because the coordinator of your VITA program has said, well, you've got to get registered with Link and Learn first to be able to volunteer. So this video right here is going to do about 5 things. First, we're going to go over how do you register with Link and Learn. And then that site is where you're going to be able to have to take some certification tests. So we're going to kind of review what those certification tests are, go over some of the resources that you have to train with those for those certifications tests. We're going to review the first couple very simple tests, one called the Volunteer Standards of Conduct and the other called the Intake Interview and Quality Review test. And then with that, let's get started. Here, I'm going to show you how to get to the Link and Learn site. So let me show you, share a browser with you, and we'll just start going there. So here we have a browser. You should be able to see this, okay? The first thing that you'll do is go up into the title bar and you're going to type in Link Learn Certification.com. You can see it's already pre-populated into that right there. By the way, uh, I will give you one of my colleagues, Pooja Sashan, has created a little tutorial of doing this, and I'll post the PowerPoint at the end of this so that you've got something static that will give you all of this information that you can kind of refer to as you go through these steps. But the purpose of this video is to walk you through the steps. So when I get to linklearncertification.com, I arrive at this screen right here. There's several things on the screen that I want to go over with. The first one is if you are a returning volunteer, which I don't think many of you are, but here's where you would go to sign in, or in this case, we're going to go create an account in just a moment. Okay. In a few moments after we go create the account, I'm going to come back to this screen because there's also some links here that you're going to use, some resources that you can learn. Like right here is a getting started. That's a tutorial that's a little bit more comprehensive than the one I'm going to give you a link to. But I mentioned that the first 2 certification tests are these intake, interview, and quality review training, and also this, I'm sorry, there should be volunteer standards of conduct on here. Oh, over here, volunteer standards of conduct, VSOC training. Those are the 2 we're going to kind of cover briefly in here, but I'll stop here for just a second to kind of explain. This video right here is the first of several training videos that we're going to create. So we're going to create videos for all of the certification tests that you will need to take. And just kind of an introduction to these tests. Yeah, you know, some of the students that we get, they freak out when they think, oh, I got to take a test. Well, let me give you some of the good news about these tests that you're going to take. First of all, you only have to get 80% to pass it. And if for some reason you don't get 80%, you get a second shot at it. So you're going to get a second chance to do it, to take the test. And then the third, the best thing, is they give you all the questions beforehand. So you can look at questions and go research the questions before you ever have to go take the test. So it's not anything to be that overly concerned about. When we get into the tax law training test, those are a little bit more difficult than these first 2. But as I said, we're going to create videos. or maybe your site coordinator will have live training for you. I conduct several live trainings for our network here, Central Arizona VITA Network, and also for my organization called Masters of Coin. Um, so with that said, let's get into started to how do you get registered? Okay, so I'm going to go up here into this thing up here and say create account. I'm going to click on that link that says create account. Now it's populating some stuff in here because of my password manager, but we're going to create a new one right here. So the first thing you've got to do is put in an email address, and I'm going to use mcvn.vita@gmail.com. Now, before I go any further right here, you should use an email address that when you get out to a site and you're working, that you can access that either through the computer that at the site or through your phone. Because sometimes you'll forget the password or you'll have to do that, and you'll probably need to be able to access that account. Okay, so make sure that this is an account that you can get to. Now, actually, what we want to do here, we want to say create a new account. I'm not trying to log into an existing one. I haven't created this account yet. So we're going to go in here to create new account. Okay. And as I said, this already populates with an email address that we're going to use a different one here. So I'm going to put in my name here. And here I'm going to use that email address I started to put in there, mcvn@gmail.com. And then the password, actually right here, passwords, be very careful right here. Read this carefully, okay? And the password's got to contain a number, a alphanumeric symbol, an English letter. Here's the big thing. It's got to be 12 characters long, and it has to be different than your username, and it's got to be somewhat uncommon. As you work at a VITA site, you're going to have 3 sets of login credentials. One is going to be this one here for Link and Learn. Then in a moment, towards the end of this video, we're going to go into Practice Lab, and you're going to have another login for that. And then when you get out to a site and you're using the real software, you're going to have a different login for that. So find a way to keep track of these. There's nothing more frustrating than to get there ready to go to work and then you got the wrong password or you're mixing it up, something. So find some way to where you keep these. And unfortunately, the requirements are different. You could use this same password right here that's 12 characters long, and maybe that's a pretty good idea for doing it. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to generate one here. My password manager generated one, and that meets all the requirements right here. I got to put in an address, 124 10th Lane, 19th Lane, doesn't matter. I'm just putting some stuff in here. I got to put in the state. I'm in Arizona, zip code. Then it's going to ask you for a phone number. This should be your cell phone number because, again, when you get to a VITA site, sometimes it's going to ask you for multi-factor authentication. So use your cell phone number here. I'll just put in a number, say you accept the policy, and then hit continue, okay? Now, this is just asking me if I want to save this here, right here, okay? I'm going to say not now, okay? Then you come to this next section right here and basically ignore it, okay? You're not an IRS spec territory manager or OPI volunteer. It's perhaps you're a site coordinator or an instructor, but most of you, I think, are just going to be volunteers. All of this stuff is optional, so I'm going to ignore it, and I'm going to say create an account. Now, it just sent a verification email to that address that I got to. So I'm going to give me just a second and I'm going to go look to confirm that at that address. I know you can't see what I'm doing here, but and it hasn't come through yet. So I'm going to pause. Oh, there we go. It just came through. So when you get that email, it's going to have a little live link on it, and you're just going to click on the live link that confirms it. So now you can see we got confirmed, okay? And then you're going to get emails at that address. So now I'll hit continue, okay? So now it takes me to this screen where I could start taking the certification test, okay? I'm not going to do this right now for two reasons. Number one, you might can see up here where it says that all the tests are currently offline. Today is like November 5th, and they haven't quite got the test up. But I'm going to continue this presentation with Pooja's uh, PDF PowerPoint presentation that will show you what the screens look like. And then I'm going to show you a lot of other things too. So let's start off with, I'm going to go back here to this dashboard. Actually, I'm going to log out of here. Okay. And I want to go back. Here's where we started, where we had these quick links. And I want to kind of go over some of these with you. These are resources that you're going to have for being able to take these certification tests. And we'll come back into that certification thing in that site in just a moment and show you how you can take the test. But let's look at some of these resources. Of course, there's a getting started one, which is really about what this video is about, getting started here. But now here's one that says intake, interview, and quality review training. If I click on that link, it takes me into kind of a PowerPoint. And I'm going to go over the basics of this with you. And which might be enough. This is not a very difficult exam. A lot of it's kind of common sense. But if you're still not comfortable taking the test yet, in the first training video that I'm going to do for the full certification path, I will go over in more detail what this is. But you can go through this right here and you can see what the objectives of the training. It shows you links to different publications, which I'm going to go over the important ones of those in just a moment. Tells you the purpose. I would basically, this says, who's it required by? Everybody at a site must take this test. This one and the second one, we're going to go over the volunteer standards of conduct. Even if you're just signing people in at the site and you do nothing with tax preparation, we all have to take these first two tests. And they're not very difficult. A lot of it is just kind of some common sense for you. Again, you can go through this PowerPoint. I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you. I think I kind of want to, yeah, this tells you some errors. This will be talking about the intake process, how we brief the taxpayers and what we do here. But let's leave this for you to look at later, and let's go back to these other things. What else is in here? There's a fact sheet for continuing education credits. This will only apply if you are a CPA, an enrolled agent, or an attorney, and you require credits for continuing education. Most of you, this will not apply to it. I'll briefly discuss this a little later in case you are a CPA. And just for your information, an enrolled agent is somebody that is certified by the IRS. It's a very difficult test you have to take. And they're not a CPA or an attorney, but they are authorized to represent the taxpayer in front of the IRS. So that's why they have to do the continuing education credits too. There's a VITA TCE training guide. And let's take a look at what that looks like right here. Okay. And actually, I don't think that took me to where, no, this is just taking me back to I think their link is broken here. So here's where I'm going to show you what that training guide is. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to type in a browser pub 4199. Did I do that? I did the right. I did the wrong one. Okay. Um, oh, I know what I did wrong. It's pub 4491. So when I go here, I'm going to go here to this publication 4491 right here. And this is the VITA TCE training guide. Now, when I used to teach these classes and, and when I do teach these classes, I talk about this guide as being the textbook, like if you're in a class. It's like 300 and some pages long. Um, it's got very detailed information. I'll kind of show you here, where you could talk about filing status and exemptions and dependents and what's taxable income, what's adjusted gross income, tax credits. You see, it's very in depth. It's about 300 and some pages. You do not need to read this, but it's if you get curious and you feel that the training or the other things haven't given you enough information, this is a good guide to get into. There's another one that we use here, and this one we're going to use a lot. I'm going to type pub 4012. And I typed that in wrong, didn't I? This is the VITA TCE Volunteer Resource Guide. Okay. This is one, first of all, the previous one, the 4491, is only available in digital form. Okay, it's a very kind of expensive book to print. This one, and this one's still expensive. This is what I call our quick reference guide. Where the other one's kind of the textbook and dives deeper into the issues, this is kind of a quick reference guide. This is a book, you will get a hard copy of it in a spiral bound thing. You will use it constantly. By the end of the tax season, my 4012, and that's kind of how we refer to it as the 4012. Mine's all marked up. I got little markers everywhere, things that I go to. This is a book you're going to use a lot. And in a lot of our training, we're going to make lots of references to the charts and the information in this 4012. But it's abbreviated. It's kind of a quick reference guide. But this is one that you're going to use a lot. So, and then, so now here's another link right here that's very useful to you. What if you can't go to some of the trainings or you don't want to watch the videos? You can self-study using these here. Let's click on this link here, Link and Learn Lessons. And this site's been up here for a long time. It's got a lot of good information, but it's a lot of information on this right here. First of all, let's look at this thing that says certification paths, right? And you're going to see here it says basic, advanced, military, international, and there's some other optional specialty courses. There are, and you can see them, they're up here, they're called Puerto Rico and Foreign Student. Okay. Now, the only one that you really should be concerned with right now is the advanced. Yeah, and some of you may be saying, well, I don't want to do advanced tax returns. Well, maybe I should just take the basic certification. And by all means, you can do that. Okay. But I will tell you that the advanced is not that much more difficult than the basic. And it will at least give you some idea of what the topics are that are covered in the advance, so that if you're sitting with a client and they start, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I do have some capital gains here, and you'll realize, oh, that's an advanced topic. So you could go ahead and certify it at the basic level, but let me tell you something. In almost any site that you go to, any site that I run, any site coordinator I've ever met, They will never ask you to do a return that you are uncomfortable with. If you start getting into the return and you see that it's a little bit complicated, just go talk to the site coordinator. They'll either help you or assign it to somebody else. And then you can learn from what that was. So I'm going to encourage you, and most of our training teaches you towards the advanced certification test. Okay. So now I could say here, choose one, what's advanced. And am I a student or a teacher? I'll say I'm a student. And here it could say start the advanced course. But instead, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to show you the whole table of contents. Do you see this link right here that says click here to see the content of each course? So right here, so here's the basic menu, and these are all interactive training things where it'll give you some topics and then you'll have to answer some questions back and forth. Here you can see is the advanced menu. It's got all of these things, and all of the training that we're going to do through YouTube or your live training will cover all of these topics. Here are those specialty courses. Military, you will probably never want to take the military unless you happen to be near a base. It's possible you might want to, and I would encourage you to if you'd like to. There's an international menu. Again, we don't do very many international returns at all. Okay. There's a foreign student menu. Now, I run a site at Scottsdale Community College, and we do get a lot of foreign students in there. So a few of us do get certified in the foreign student one. But this is a little bit more complicated. As I'm saying, then down here, there's Puerto Rico and a couple of others. We're going to just concentrate on the advanced one right here. So now, as I go back there, let's go back to those. Does that get me back to where I want to go? No, here. Here we go. This is where I want to go, right? So we were just, there's how you could access those lessons. Okay, towards the end of this video, we're going to access the practice lab. So here's one place you could get to the practice lab. Okay, here's another. Okay, now this one's important. Remember I told you that, yeah, uh-oh, it logged me out of here, but I think it's going to log me back in here again. Yeah, okay. Yeah, again, it's early in the semester, early in the season, that link is broken. It didn't take me to where I wanted to go. So I'm going to go back up here, and I know what the publication is called. It's Pub 6744. And you're going to like this one, okay? See where it says VITA TCE, Volunteer Assisters Test and Retest. Remember I told you that if you don't pass it the first time, you can take it a second time. That's why they call this a retest. And this booklet right here, this has got all of the questions. These are the actual questions that they're going to test you on, okay? And as you can see here, there's the basic scenarios, which I'm going to ask you to just ignore those, right? I'll scroll on down here. Here's where the advanced scenarios start. And by the way, what's a scenario? Okay, in these tests, the advanced scenario, they're going to give you 4 scenarios right here. Let me see if I'm doing that right. Is it? No, I think there's 3 scenarios where they just give you a fact pattern and then have you answer some questions to it. The other 3, you have to actually prepare a tax return and then answer the questions about the tax return. That's what we're going to use Practice Lab for. And of course, down here you can see there's military and international. But let me go back up here because I missed something here. Oh, okay. Yeah, look here. Volunteer Standards of Conduct test. And here's the retest. And here's the intake interview and quality review questions. And then the intake and quality review retest. And then if you were a site coordinator, you could take this test down here. But let's stop sharing this right here. So these are all the questions that you're going to get. And we'll come back to this in a minute when we start talking about the Volunteer Standards of Conduct test. But For right now, let's go see. And then, by the way, there's a volunteer standards of conduct training as well that you can do. So let's right now go back, and I'm going to stop sharing this screen and share another one with you that, there it is down here. Okay. This is, remember I told you one of my colleagues, Pooja, she'd created this PowerPoint, which turned it into a PDF. And I'm going to attach that at the bottom of this video. So you can look at this and see it. She did this a couple years ago, and I've edited this somewhat to be for the 2025. It's all basically the same. But so a minute ago, we went in here and yeah, let's go back up here to where we left off in the real one. Remember, we went up here. This was where we said we were creating the account, right? And I told you ignore all of these things and then click on create an account. And then it takes you here to where you log into that account and you can use the information you just did to log into it. Okay. And it takes you back to here. Now, the reason I stopped is because if I was going to go take a test, it's going to tell me, oh, the tests aren't available yet. So I want to show you this screen so you at least see what you're looking for when you go there. Okay. The first thing, once you get into here, you can go in here and see where it says click on these little initials up here, and this will access your profile. And actually, I think I could probably go that and show you live. Why don't I do that and show you live what that part would look like? Okay. Yeah. So what if I go in here and I'm going to sign into that account that I just created here? Okay, I'm already signed in. It left me signed in. But again, I kept telling you, if I try to go take a certification test, it's going to say that all these tests are currently offline. But let's go here. This is something you'll want to do first off, is modify your profile. And if right up here, see where it has my initials, JS, if I click on that, I can then go click on profile. And then it asks me to confirm here. By the way, if you ever wanted to reset your password, here's one way you could go do it. But down here on this left are some tabs that we're going to go through here. I could upload an avatar or an image. That's your choice. You don't need to. Okay. Here's contact information. Two things I want to make sure that you're aware of, and perhaps I didn't say this when you go create your account in Lincoln Learn. Your name must match your driver's license. Your site coordinator is going to ask you for your identification, and IRS requires that we use the exact name that's on your driver's license. For instance, my name, I go by Jim Simpson. My official name is James. I hate James. I never tell anybody to call me James. But in this, I would need to put in James Simpson because it needs to match that. Same thing with the address. It has to match what's in there. The next tab says group selection, and this was one I told you ignore these unless you're a site coordinator, right? But then the next tab, IRS spec profile details. Now, the first one is only for IRS employees, but right here it says select the spec area that you work in, right? Everybody, well, okay, depending on the area of the country you're in, I'm in area 3, so I'm going to select area 3, okay? The next one will say form 13615 details. Okay, IRS loves their form numbers, so you're going to have to start getting used to, oh, Pub 4012 or Pub 6744 or Form 13615 or whatever. The 13615 is your volunteer agreement. Okay, and here you're going to put in some things for your volunteer agreement where it says training source, and this isn't that critical, but I would put in publication 4491. I mean, if you were to go through those resources I showed you earlier, you could put here, and it doesn't really matter. They're just trying to look at, get this for there. So who's your sponsoring partner name? Okay, my partner is Masters of Coin. You might be Pooja, who created that slideshow. She runs the VITA program for A New Leaf, is a nonprofit organization. Or we have here in Maricopa County, the city of Phoenix, or it could be that. So I could put in here Masters of Coin. Okay. How many years have you volunteered? And by the way, it says here, number of years volunteered, including this year. So nobody should put 0. You should put at least 1. Me, I've been doing this for, I don't know, I think this will be my 11th year now. Now, down here it says professional designation for Circular 230 only. This is probably not going to apply to you. This will only apply to you if you are a CPA, an attorney, or an enrolled agent. And they can take a specialized test that then enables them to do the whole gamut of VITA returns, tax returns. And then also you'd need to put this in if you want to get continuing education. Me, I'm a CPA, so I'll go ahead and put that in here. Here's volunteer positions, right? Most of you are just going to click VITA volunteer, okay? Or perhaps you're an AARP. They run tax counseling for the elderly, which that might be interesting for you to know. You'll see lots of acronyms that say VITA/TCE. VITA is Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. TCE is Tax Counseling for the Elderly. All the volunteers in both programs take the same test. TCE is pretty much basically run by ARP. I'm not sure exclusively, but and ARP has their own training system, but they still take the same tests that we do. You could say you're a military volunteer, an employee. As I say, almost none of these are going to apply to you. Maybe you're an instructor, right? But click here, VITA volunteer. And then if you are a CPA or an attorney and you want continuing education credit, by the way, for those of you, if anybody's listening to it, this is pretty valuable stuff. I think I get 16 hours a year. You have to take the certification test, and then I think you have to volunteer at least 30 hours to get those 16 credits. But that's kind of a valuable thing. You've got to have a P10 number. You've got to have, I'm sorry, a P10 account identification number. You can say, here's my status if I'm a CPA. You have to have your site identification number. Your site coordinator can give that to you. Okay. So this is all of those things. I'm going to discard this. This was a fake account anyway. Okay. So let me stop sharing here. And I'm going to go back into Pooja's. Let's see, where was he? Believe it, yeah, this was her. We just went through all of these things in a lot. Remember, I told you I'm gonna attach this to the video, to this PDF, so that you could open this up, to follow as a guide as you go set these up. But we've gone through all of these right here. Okay, once you've completed that, you saw me say cancel, right? You want to say save to save all that profile information. And then it's going to take you back to this page to where you could start taking a certification test. So when you either click right here to take a certification test, or you can click up, yeah, I know you can't see it up here where it says certifications. It's going to take, oh, right here. You'll say take certification test, or click right here. It's going to take you to this screen. Okay. Do you want to take the basic, advanced, circular 230, or foreign student one? Okay. Remember, I'm trying to encourage all of you to take the advanced test. However, when you click right here on advanced, it's going to say, oh, whoops, you still have to take the volunteer standards of conduct and the intake interview and quality review test. So you're going to click on here, start, to start the volunteer standards of conduct test. So With that, let's talk about that test a little bit. I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of the volunteer standards conduct. I would encourage you, you could go click on those links, just scan through it. It's not a difficult test. In fact, we might just go through and look at some of the questions, what gives you an idea of what it is. But so this is the end of Pooja's slide. Okay. I just stopped sharing for that. Let's see, what else did I want to cover? Yeah, let's talk about the volunteer standards of conduct. And in fact, I may just pull up that link that I was going to show you here. So if I go back out here to home, or I say log out here, and that takes me back into this certification. Let's go take a look at this volunteer standards of conduct training right here. This kind of looks like a publication book. And you'll notice right here it says ethics training. This is really what this is all about, is it's an ethics training. You know, what are our objectives here at a VITA site? And I will tell you, our main objective is to do an accurate tax return. When we have a client come in here, our main goal is if they owe any tax, we don't want them to pay a nickel more than they owe. Most of our clients are getting refunds, and usually those refunds are generated by credits. And we want to make sure we do this accurately where we get them every dollar they're entitled to. That's the whole basis of what we're doing here. What's in this guide right here? First of all, on this page, and let me make this a little bit bigger if I can. Yeah. First of all, these are the volunteer standards of conduct right here. So first of all, it says follow all the quality site requirements. There's 10 of those. I'll briefly go over those in a second. Okay. Volunteer standards of conduct number 2. Do not accept payment, ask for donations, or accept refund payments for federal or state tax return preparation from customers. So, as I told you, that's kind of common sense, isn't it? Right? Don't think we need to really do that. We do this free of charge. We don't take tips. We don't take, you know, if a client brings in a box of donuts and we share them with everybody, including clients, well, that's okay, right? But you know, they can't bring you any special thing like that. Volunteer standards of conduct 3. We do not solicit business from taxpayers. Now, and this can get kind of tricky here because you're going to learn in when we get to the intake and quality review that there is a what we call a scope of returns that we can do. And what that means is there's certain types of returns we can do and certain types we can't do. For instance, if they come in and they say they have a rental property, we can't do rental properties. Or they come in and a couple and they insist that they're going to do married filing separate. That is out of scope. We can't do those. So then they're going to ask you, well, can you refer me to somebody who can? No, we cannot refer them to anybody. I'm a CPA. They'll learn that and say, well, can't you just kind of help me on the side? No, I cannot take any business from that. I can't refer it to my friends, right? That's a solid rule. We cannot do that. That goes for other things like insurance or other kind. We're not there to generate any business from these folks. We're here to help them prepare their tax return. So that's very important right there. Volunteer standard of conduct 4. Do not knowingly prepare false returns. Duh. I mean, I know that sounds like, well, okay, why would they put in there? Of course, we're not going to prepare false returns. But there gets to be a fine line. You know, you get somebody who comes in there and they start telling you things and they kind of let it slip that they had a little side business doing lawns, but they only made a couple $100 out of that. Well, we can't ignore that. And you'll learn about that, how we can't. Once they tell you that, if we prepare the return, it's a false, inaccurate return. We can't do it. So if they, you're listening, if they tell you stuff, they can't undo what they said, you know. So that's kind of thing. Volunteer standards of conduct 5. This one's a little bit vague. And if there's any tricky question in this, it has to do with this one. Because it says, do not engage in criminal, infamous, dishonest, notoriously disgraceful conduct. But here's this federal one, or any other conduct considered to have a negative effect on the VITA programs. Right? So basically, it speaks for itself, right? And then the last one says, treat all taxpayers in a professional, courteous, and respectful manner. I will tell you right now, sometimes, people get upset. They ended up owing money when they got refunds last year and they don't understand why, and they get aggravated. Okay. It is not your job to have to put up with anything. Just go get the site coordinator, let the site coordinator handle it. I mean, you're welcome to try to diffuse the situation, but you need to do it in a respectful manner. And if it starts to get out of control, don't let it get out of control. Get the site coordinator. That's their job. Let them, you're not paid enough to handle any abuse or anything. Never take any abuse from a client, and never escalate it either, doing that. Okay, what happens if you violate anything? Failure to comply with these standards. Yes, you can be removed from VITA TCE programs. Yes, there is a blacklist, right, that does it. So, you want to adhere to these volunteer standards of conduct. You could be included in that registry that bars future VITA participation indefinitely. It could get worse if you really did something nefarious. It could be deactivation of your sponsor's site, and you wouldn't want that to happen. Okay. IRS could remove all the products and supplies and loaned equipment from the site. This is not likely to happen. I mean, this would have to be something nefarious, but these are some of the consequences of not following it. This could be a big one. Many of our sites rely on IRS grant funding. And if we were to be doing something wrong, they could yank our grants. Okay. And that could be do it. And at worst, I mean, if you really did something wrong, you could get referred for criminal prosecution. Let me stop right there. Okay. Because you're hearing all of this stuff, especially the last one I just said. Wow, do I want to volunteer in this? Let me tell you something that's really not in these materials right here. You as a volunteer, you're covered by the Volunteer Protection Act. As long as you do everything per our rules, per the VITA rules, and you don't do a return that's out of scope or something, even if you make a mistake, right? You cannot be sued. Nobody can hold you liable for it. You are doing this as a volunteer. And as long as you didn't do something intentionally wrong, that puts you into a different category there. As long as you follow the rules and do the best of your ability, nobody can sue you for anything for doing that. So I just wanted to put you at ease. So here's some, I'm not going to go through the rest, all of this booklet, but a couple of things I'll do. Here it says unethical defined. What is the definition of unethical, right? And you want to differentiate between what's just a simple mistake versus what's unethical. And if you intentionally do something wrong, that's unethical behavior. And that's not tolerated. But if you just make a mistake, right, it's just a mistake. I mean, I will tell you, I've been a CPA for 30 years. I remember when I first started working in a large firm, my mentor would tell me, and this was a large CPA firm, he'd say, I bet you every return that goes out this door has got a mistake on it. Our job is just to make sure that it's trivial and doesn't matter, right? And that's what we're looking for, is to get an accurate return. Everybody makes mistakes. I go into a VITA site, you're going to learn in a little bit, every return gets a second set of eyes. Even if I prepare a return and I've got 30 years of experience, I make mistakes. We all make them. Okay, so, and then we have a second set of eyes that goes and looks at it to make sure that we're at least, there's no major mistake in it. We try to make it perfect if we can. Our whole goal is to do an accurate return. Okay. I've already Oh, in here, I'm sorry, there is a section in here on the Volunteer Protection Act that you could look for it. Okay, so this is basically a summary of the volunteer standards of conduct. Let's go take a look at some of the questions. So let's take a look at this test booklet right here. Okay, right here at the top, as I told you, this will have the test and the retest in them. Okay, and down here you can see that all of the tests are in here, including, we're going to go take a look at this volunteer standard of conduct test. But here then there's the intake interview and quality review test, the basic scenarios, which remember, just ignore those. Just concentrate on the advanced scenarios. As I say, this is giving you the questions. And by the way, you're going to see that there's a test and a retest. I have some very good, what I hope is good advice for you. Okay. As you're doing it here, you're going to get this booklet. It will be given to you in a hard copy format. Go through and take the test in the booklet. There's an answer sheet down here that you could put in your answers right down here. Whoops. Right here, test answer sheet. Or with me, I just kind of circle them in the test, right? But the real advice I want to give you is take both the test and the retest. They're basically they sound really similar questions, but they just do a little tweak on them. And sometimes the retest questions will make you realize, oh, whoops, I made a mistake on the test question. So it kind of informs each other. And then when you go to take the real one on the certification site, these are the actual questions that you're going to get right here. So let's take a look at the volunteer standards of conduct test right here. So I told you this is a test that's really testing you on ethics. And it's a test that you got to take every year. Even if I've been volunteering 11 years, I have to go take this test every year. Anybody who works in the site has got to take this test. Okay. So here's some of the questions right here. Prior to working at a VITA TCE site, all VITA TCE volunteers must, and here's another test taking suggestion, read all the answers. Don't just stop at the first one. Okay? Because sometimes you can see that there'll be multiple answers that will qualify for this. But I think when you could take this, okay, well, it'll say something about sign and date the form 13615. Now, I haven't really talked about that volunteer standards of conduct agreement much, but if you're not sure about that, pull up that publication I just showed you, right, on the volunteer standards of conduct, and just go look at it, okay, and look at what it says. Can a volunteer be removed and barred from the VITA TCE program for violating the volunteer standards of conduct? I think we kind of already talked about that. Here, this one, taxpayer offers you a $20 bill because they were so happy. What did we say about, taking tips or payment for it, right? Here's another one, that gets a little bit hazier, right? It says Jake is an IRS tax law certified volunteer preparer. He's preparing a return for Jill, and Jill doesn't have a bank account to receive direct deposit for a refund. And when Jake tells her that, hey, it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks longer, Jill says, well, hey, can't you just put the money in your account and then give it to me when it gets there? What should he do, right? Again, this is ethical, common sense. I don't think you're going to have any trouble answering these questions at all, okay? Here's another one about referring business to his wife who sells health insurance, right? Here's another one about preparing an accurate return, right? And about the quality reviewer. By the way, and maybe I haven't completely talked about this, but I did mention it a little bit earlier. Every return has to be quality reviewed, okay? So there's always two sets of eyes that look at the return, okay? And so this is a question about somebody who's, the client said something about having cash income whether it has to be reported or not. I think if you read this, common sense is going to lead you to the right answer. This one was a little tricky right here. Okay, this one right here. Sue's the SC, the site coordinator, and she sees a local news report where one of her volunteers is being led away in handcuffs, being arrested for suspicion of embezzlement, and then he turns up to volunteer. What's Sue supposed to do? And I kind of pointed out one of those volunteer standards of conduct says, well, yeah, you can't be convicted of anything, you can't, but it's also, it talks about the appearance, anything that would be harmful to the VITA program, right? So be sure you kind of look at that. So there's 10 questions here. Fairly simple questions. I think you could go take them right now. You can even miss 2 and still pass it, right? And even if you miss 3 or more, you can go back, take it again, go review that handbook a little bit more carefully. But this is basically making sure that we all adhere to those 6 volunteer standards of conduct. Then here's the retest. Now I told you, take both the test and the retest, because this one is just saying which volunteers must pass the volunteer standards of conduct certification test. This is the same question as up above, just reformatted a little differently. And you may find little clues in these questions that make you think, oh, whoops, did I answer that one in the test wrong? So take these. As I say, each one of these here's one that says, is having a donation tip jar a violation of the volunteer standards of conduct? It's basically the same question that was up there above, just in a little different format, or sometimes the answers will be in a little different format. Take both of them before you go take the one on the Link and Learn site. Okay, so there's the volunteer standards of conduct. Let me stop sharing this one. And let's spend just a few more minutes on the intake and quality review. Let's go take a look at that one publication I showed you could access from the Link and Learn main site that said it's the intake and interview and quality review training. Let's go take a look at that right now. I'm not going to go over all of this but I'm going to kind of go over the basics of what this is covering. And I will do a more thorough review of this in the first training session if you'd prefer to wait for doing that. Otherwise, you can look through this. I'm going to talk about the basics of it, and you could look through this thing and look through this publication and take the intake interview and quality review training. So we're looking at this right now. This is kind of like in a PowerPoint thing that they created into a PDF, right? This introduces a couple of things here. It says, basically what it's saying is that every person who comes into the site has to fill out this form 13614, right? It's called the Intake Interview and Quality Review Sheet. This is the basic tool that we use to gather information about the taxpayer. And it asks them a series of questions: what forms that they have, what kinds of income they had, did they have children, did they get insurance under the Affordable Care Act, how do they want their refunds deposited. That's what that intake sheet is all about. And it's really important that they fill it out accurately and completely. And then we interview them about that sheet to try to extract all the information we need to prepare an accurate return. And this will kind of talk about the basic steps of the intake process, the basic steps of the interview process. What's the difference? What's the intake process? It's when they walk in the door. And when they walk in the door, whoever is the greeter or screener that greets them, the first things we're going to ask them for is, did they bring a social security card, right? Did they bring a photo ID? We can't do a return without seeing the social security card or an official document that has their social security number, such as their social security statement. That, at least I haven't seen them come out this year. They've been threatening to X out the social security numbers, but so far they haven't. Okay, we'll see what happens this year. But that would be an official government document. There's not many of those. Most of them, they're all X'd out. So that's the intake process is making sure they've got all their documents and stuff and they fill out that form. And then we do the interview. Usually there's different sites have different things. Sometimes the site will have a dedicated interviewer because that's at the point in time where you could be sure we're going to be able to complete the return. But if they're missing something, maybe you send them away there before they get halfway through the process. If they're missing a W-2 or they're missing some other form, right? Um, there are some publications here. I've kind of reviewed several of them with him, like this 4012. Um, we're going to talk about the volunteer quality site requirements on here because that's what a lot of these questions are about. Okay, this will tell you benefits of a quality review. I'm sorry, a quality intake and interview. Okay. Um, who must take this test? Everybody must take this test. It's not that complicated. These slides will give you everything that you need to know to take it, right? Um, part of this intake quality review is that you do due diligence. You really ask the questions to elicit the correct information from the taxpayer. And they do that by going over this form 13614C, which is the intake sheet. We kind of just abbreviate it as that. Okay. This will talk about top quality errors. This is the intake process. Here it's kind of going over with you what that sheet looks like. Oh, here's something that's important. Remember, I did talk about the certification level of the tax returns. And I said you could certify at the basic level. But another factor that goes into this is every return must be quality reviewed, and it must be quality reviewed by somebody who's of the same or more advanced level than you are. So if you're only certified at the basic and you start wanting to do quality review, then you can't review an advanced return. Okay, you could only do that. Likewise, if it's a military return, you can only review it if you're military. Okay. Again, the intake process, it'll give you an idea. I talked about scope of service. Okay, and there are just certain returns that we cannot do. In that publication 4012, that book that you're going to be handed, right at the first, there's about 3 pages that go over all of the things that we cannot do. That's kind of complicated to read. Most sites will do more of an abbreviated form that have the most common things that we come across, such as rental properties or married filing separate returns, or the things that we cannot do will be there. Okay, so here's some kind of questions. Talks about the interview process. I already talked about the ID being required, right? There is one exception to not having the Social Security card, and that's this if it's known to the site. First of all, you as a preparer, you don't make this decision. It's the site coordinator who makes the decision. If they don't have their Social Security card, but they're known to the site, we've been doing their returns for 3 years. We can roll over their returns and it's there. And we see their ID and we know it's them. The site coordinator can choose to kind of do that. Okay. But those are more rare than what we would do. Okay. These are all questions on that intake and interview sheet. This would be good to how this should be filled out. You'll see that there's some grayed out areas on the interview sheet, and those are supposed to be filled out by the certified volunteer. They need to answer those questions about every dependent that's on the return. Okay, not the taxpayer. Similarly, on page 2, there's all of these gray areas to where we, as the interviewer, we have to acknowledge on this thing that we've asked them about all of these questions. And we put in here check mark, and that this is for us to make sure, even if they left these blank, we need to ask them about it to make sure we do a quality return. Okay. Basically, a lot of these other things are, again, just going through that intake sheet. Okay. There's also consents that the taxpayer needs to sign, and there can be different consent forms depending on the site, depending on what the site wants to do. Generally, the last page of the intake form has, let's see, the last page of the intake form has this global carry forward right here. Let's see, what else do I want to see here? Quality review process. What is the quality review process? That's where you have another preparer. Sometimes sites will have designated quality reviewers, where that's all that they do. And then so you know that they're going to be the ones reviewing your return. Others, they do something called peer-to-peer review, whereas whoever's next available, as long as they're certified at least at the same level, and of course, they've got some experience. The site coordinator is going to identify those people who should do quality reviews. Usually you're not going to do that in your first year until you get a little experience under your belt for doing it. However, self-review is never allowed. You always have to have the return reviewed. Okay. Let's see here. When the reviewer is done with it, and by the way, the review is done with the taxpayer. You're confirming all of these things to make sure we do an accurate return, because when we get all done with this, it's the taxpayer who has to sign, and they're the one responsible for the return. We just put in what they gave us. We're not responsible if they left something out. Okay, and we let them know that right at the end of the, actually, me as a preparer, I will tell you most of the times when I'm with a client, they've heard this 3 times. Sometimes when they're giving you some kind of information that you're not sure about, but it doesn't really cross the lines to where you're not going to do the return. You say, you're the one responsible for this. They say, well, I made charitable donations of $250, but I'm not sure I've got the receipts for all of it. You explain the rules to them and you say, okay, we're going to take your word at this, but you should go home and make sure you gather those receipts, because if you get audited, you're the one that's responsible for it. Okay. And they're going to sign a document, and actually, I don't usually read it to them. That's some fine print, but it's some scary language that say, hey, you're signing this and attesting under penalties of perjury that this is accurate. I don't really, I mainly just say you're the one responsible for the return. Okay. So have I covered most of what you want to do here? Yeah. Let's take a look at the form 6744. This is the test and retest. Let's look at a couple of these questions to see what they're look. So here are intake interview and quality review test questions. So what kind of questions are they asking you? And by the way, there's only 10 of these as well. Okay. So they're asking you here, all IRS certified volunteer preparers participating in the program must use form 13614C, or there's another variation. This is for non-resident aliens. Supporting documentation and a thorough interview for every return prepared at the site. Okay, remember I was kind of telling you about the common sense kind of questions? I think you can answer that. What must a certified volunteer preparer do with the form 13614C before starting the return? Verify each of their responses. For any box left unchecked, write no or not applicable and leave a check mark by the notes and comments, right? Determine the certification level required to complete the return. By the way, on that 13614, see the intake form over on the left, along each question, there's going to be a little A, B, um, M or I on there that designates the certification level if that question is answered yes. So that's one way you could really know what the certification level is. Also, your 4012 has a chart that shows what the certification level is. Now, here's one that you might have to go do a little research on. The basic certification level is required to prepare a return with unreported tip income. Again, now you can pull up that 4012 and you can go look at what's in scope and out of scope. You might want to go review that before you answer this question. Okay. This one would be pretty simple. You could just go look at page 1 to see where the filing status is. And here again, okay, at the first of in that thing, I showed you those other publications. There's a publication 4299 about privacy, confidentiality, and civil rights. You might want to go just open that up and take a look at it to see if this could answer the question for you. Okay. VITA TCE sites are required to conduct quality reviews for all returns prepared by those who have less than 2 years of experience for every return prepared at the site, only when there's a quality reviewer available. Okay, now this is one of those common sense ones. Okay, I think you're getting the idea that these are not terribly difficult questions. If you find a little bit that you're saying, go hit the books and look it up, which leads me to another thing about all of these tests. Now, by the way, when you get to the advanced certification test, these are a little bit harder, okay? But I will tell you this, that really what IRS is looking for here is, can you recognize the things you don't know and learn where to go find them out, learn where to go look it up. That's what they're testing you on here. That's why it's all open book and all that. So use your common sense and your test taking skills. And where you're not sure of something, you read the answers, you're not sure, go hit the books and look it up. When you actually get into a site, and I told you this earlier, you will never be required to do a return that you're uncomfortable with. And I promise you that. Just talk to the site coordinator. They're not going to look at, they will praise you for that, for doing. And that's one of the ways that you'll learn. But sometimes what you want to do, maybe it's just a simple thing you're not sure about. We all work at this together. You're going to find volunteers at your site that they develop little expertise. We have somebody at one of our sites, Trisha. She's an expert at education credits. And so when we're not sure, we go ask her about something. So you use all of these resources that are available to you to be able to do an accurate tax return. Again, now here's the retest. I really encourage you, go take the retest ones too. That's going to really help you determine, yeah, okay, I got this down pat. Okay, that concludes what we've done about this, but I would like to reemphasize what we just went over, the volunteer standards of conduct and the intake and quality review. That was just a brief introduction and to introduce you to the training materials that IRS provides you. That can be enough to help you go take those first 2 certification exams. But if you're not quite comfortable with that, in our next video session, our next training session, which is called 1A, we'll go in much more detail on the volunteer standards of conduct and the intake and quality review. So with that said, that concludes our first getting started video. The next video, hope to see you there, will be 1A that will cover the volunteer standards of conduct and quality review, along with a few other things too. Okay, see you then. Bye-bye.